Alrighty, it's big decision time. We're going to draw some foothills. You might notice a pattern here now. We're going to need to do two things. We're going to mix some colors to create the color for our foothills, and we're going to create a brush. So let's start with the brush. There's a brush called Rake Texture, which works great as a starting point for us to use. If we go to the presets, we can clear our search here, and I'm going to type in Rake. Let's see what we get. There's a brush here called Rake Texture. That's what I want to start with. So I'm going to select that, and now we're going to go up to the brush engine, and we're going to modify this. Let's pull back the icon. We can see what it looks like. A couple things we're going to modify. Not much though. If you go to the brush tip, you can see that the brush actually uses this brick-like texture. And if I choose a blue or something like that, you can see it's a brick. But when you start drawing with it, it has a cool effect. Okay, so with our brick, we're going to change the size to about 100. Whatever your size was before, 100. That's the size we want. We're imitating kind of 1 inches. That's Bob Ross is using that 2-inch brush on the side, so 1 inch seems good enough. And the other thing we want to do actually, and this is just kind of from testing and playing around, is I want to change the opacity. I don't want it to get quite so dim as I go up like that, because this is the stroke we're going to use to try and replicate what Bob Ross does. So let's go to the opacity option, and you can see here our opacity curve, our pressure curve. I'll take a moment to explain this graph now, because we're going to be getting more into these graphs later on. So right now we're affecting the opacity of the brush, which is basically how see-through it is, or how transparent it is. So when I have lots of pressure, it's barely transparent, and as I slowly let go, it becomes lighter and lighter. You notice it actually gets smaller and smaller as well, and that's because of this here size change, but we're not going to worry about that for now. So for opacity, right now the opacity is affected by pressure. But I could have the opacity affected by something else. Really, anything else I wanted. I could choose speed. I'm going to turn off pressure, turn on speed, and in this case, the faster I go, so a high speed, the more opaque it will be, and the slower I go, the less opaque it will be. So I'm going slow, and I go fast. Fast. Super fast. Slow, it's barely see it, and I go faster and faster and faster. So one thing you notice here is that there's an extra dot here, and it's bending the curve down. Whoops. I just added a dot by accident just by clicking. To get rid of these dots, you can click on them. When you hover over, you should get a crosshair. You can click and grab them, and you just pull them right off, and they'll come off. So this is what the curve looked like for this guy. If I go to speed, I have an extra dot here, which means that it's going to be transparent unless I start going really, really fast. Or if we're using pressure, it'll stay transparent quite a bit unless you're adding a lot of pressure. So at high pressure, it gets really dark, and then it falls off really fast. Whew. Let's get rid of that. Let's just straighten that out. To see this better, let's turn off the size dynamic for a moment, because that's kind of distracting. Okay, and under opacity, let's check out that speed again. Slow, fast. How about drawing angle? This is kind of cool. So now, at 0 degrees drawing angle, which is the direction I'm drawing in, it will be transparent, and at 360 degrees it'll be opaque. So if I draw a circle, you should notice a neat effect where it's pale, and as I slowly turn, it's going to get darker and darker and darker until I'm reaching 360 degrees. It's going to be fully solid, and then at some point it's going to jump to 0 again. There it is. So you can see how these dynamics work. They're a lot of fun to play around with. I just wanted to give you a little bit of familiarization here. The linear relationship here is the easiest to visualize and understand. To start, I'm going to turn off drawing angle. I'm going to turn it back on pressure. I've removed that extra dot. I do want something more linear here. I'm going to turn size back on. So this is basically back to the defaults we had. And I'm looking for something like this. Yeah, that looks good. I'm going to hit this to get the rake texture back. I'm going to choose, let's just choose some sap green for now. And I'm going to draw some little bit here, just so we can see on the icon. Okay, now I'm going to save it. Let's call this our Foothills brush. It's BR Foothills. Okay, and I can save it. We should have a new icon. We don't yet because we didn't add the tag. So let's go to the brush presets. I'll search for BR, clear that search. BR, there's BR Foothills, right click it, assign a tag, Bob Ross, and there you can see it appeared right there. Awesome. Okay, we have a brush. Let's make a new layer for our Foothills. Hit the little plus symbol. We'll call it Foothills. I'm going to call it Foothills 1 because we will have 3 layers of Foothills. And now let's get a color. I've restarted Krita, and that's caused my digital colors mixer to lose the preset colors we have in here. So the quickest way to get this back, since this happens regularly if you're working on a project with a palette using the digital colors mixer, is to click this, and for me it's remembering that Bob Ross was the palette I last used, or maybe it's because it's the palette I'm using now. Here I'm going to choose sap green. We're going to mix in some sap green, and Bobby actually uses phthalo blue, but for us Prussian blue. For me, Prussian blue worked better, so I'm going to use some Prussian blue. The rest of the colors don't matter yet. I'm going to put in some mountain mixture there, and just because I like these colors better, I'm going to throw in a few others. With the mountain mixture as our foreground color, we're going to mix in about 50% sap green, which your little triangle should already be set at. And I'm going to mix in just a little bit less than 50% of Prussian blue. Tap that, and there we go. We have a very bluish green color, just like Bobby wants. Now, I keep interrupting us before we paint, and I'm going to do it again because when we draw our Foothills, we're going to be drawing 3 different layers, and as we get closer to us on each layer, the color is going to get darker and darker. And there are several ways to do that. Right now, I can show you. We could just draw. Then when we want our next darker color, we could just mix in some more mountain mixture. I can say mix in 50% mountain mixture. I can just tap that. I'll get a little bit darker color. And then for my third layer, I could tap it again, and I could get an even darker color. And that works all right. And even if I don't like the proportions, this is getting too dark, it's also losing its saturation, it's losing its green, it's getting very grayish black. There are several ways to get your original colors back. One way, obviously, is we could remix it. We could go back, we could set mountain mixture as our background color, and then since these dials are already set, I can just add the sap green, add the Prussian blue, and I have my base Foothills color back. Another thing we can do is if you right click, you'll notice a wheel of colors around here, and these are the last colors that you painted with. This is your paint history. Now, this paint history will reset when you restart Krita, which is why right now it's only showing these 4 colors. This color history will also appear in the advanced color selector, and I want to show you something else on the advanced color selector too. So I'm going to open it. It pops back up for me right here. You can see on the far right I have my color history. There are the 3 colors, and I can choose these colors by tapping them, and they'll become my new foreground color. This is another way to get colors back. If you don't see this column to the right of your advanced color selector, you can hit this menu item here, and at the end you'll see color history and colors from image. So what mine is showing is the color history, and you can turn it on. You could set different settings, how big they are, how many patches it has. There's some other neat settings here for the advanced color selector too, which I'm not going to worry about now. The other thing I want to use the advanced color selector to show you is another way to lighten and darken your colors. In Krita, there is a shortcut where you can hit K to darken your current color and L to lighten it. And the easiest way to see that visually is with this little circle here on the advanced color selector. I can see the color I have right now is here. So here we have our base Foothills color. And if we look at this little circle on our advanced color selector, when I hit K, you'll see how much darker it got. And now I have a darker green, a darker color. And if I hit K again, we'll get one layer darker. Now we're almost black if we're not black already. And another thing you need to be aware of when you're using K and L is that it won't necessarily come back lighter the same way it went darker, especially as you get to the edges and in the corner. So now if I hit L, notice that it's going to the right now. Okay, and if you go right into the corner, then you're just going to get stuck along one of the edges. So just be aware of that. If you're using K and L to go back and forth between a lighter and darker color, it may not necessarily go back and forth between two exactly the same colors. I'm going to hit the delete key to clear the active layer. And I'm going to go back to my base Foothills color, which, as you can see now as we've been playing around, I find it difficult to use this color history with the kind of painting that we're doing, because all the different shades as we're adjusting things will show up here, and plus it disappears when you restart Krita. So I'm going to go back up to my palette and I'm going to set the mountain mixture as my foreground, and I'm going to tap here, and I have my base color. But remember, when we tried to get 2 levels darker, we got dark too fast and we ended up with black, and I don't want that color to be our closest set of Foothills. So again, I'm hitting the delete key to clear my layer. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my mountain color, and I'm going to start 1 level lighter. So I'm going to hit L. This is going to be our first layer of Foothills farthest from us. And then as we get closer, I will use the K key to bring us closer. Okay, here we go. Big decisions. Let's start out here with some Foothills right about here. So the way I found the easiest way to draw these Foothills is short strokes upwards. Now Bobby does short strokes downwards, but when I do that I get this little curve at the top, so do whatever works best for you. Try not to create a straight line like I'm doing here. Create different levels, layers to make it look a little more natural. And you can whip these out. This is pretty fast. This is pretty easy to do. I spent a lot of time describing some of these features of Krita, and you'll find that if you go back and try this again, you can whip out this entire painting probably within half an hour or so. There we go. Now I'm going to switch to my blending brush, and I'm going to blend this down. Now remember, if you're getting too much white, it's because you're starting your blending brush a little too far down. So just move your brush up more into the green areas. You don't need to blend it down very much. We do want to have a good layer there to separate our Foothills, and you can always bring some of that back up a little bit. Short, gentle strokes. Looking good. Okay, so back to our Foothills brush. Now I'm going to hit K to darken us up 1 layer, and let's do our next layer of Foothills here. I'm going to create a new layer for Foothills 2. Just to give us a little more flexibility if we want to move them around relative to each other later on. And let's get this next layer of Foothills down. And since we're on another layer here, I can use that move tool with the T key and just adjust it a little bit if I want. And actually what we're going for is we're going for that gradient with a little bit of lighter color between the Foothills layers. So I'm going to move this something like that actually. And B to get back to the brush. Let's blend this. And at this point you might be noticing a little problem we're having with our blending brush and the way we have our layers set up. And that is, I'm not able to blend the layers below. It's only blending the Foothills layer I'm on, and I cannot get rid of that line from the water layer. I'm going to show you how to deal with that in the next video. For now, let's create another layer for Foothills 3. We'll go back to our Foothills brush. I'm going to hit K to get one layer darker again, and here we go. So already I'm getting a little too close to the other layer of Foothills. I keep doing this, so T, I'm just going to move that down a little bit to separate the layers of Foothills. You can see how much better it looks now that you can see that little gradient and a little bit of lighter color here. Go back to B to the brush and I'll finish off this time. Try not to get too close. Don't worry about how close you get to the waterline because we'll be setting our waterline in the next video as well. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Finish off. Let's just blend that down. When you're blending this one down, just to make it a little easier, try and just create a kind of a line there on the bottom. We can fix that up next time when we create our water layer, but going for something like that. And there, see there how we can see the water line behind the trees and it's not blending with us? We're going to deal with that next video. Thanks for joining me. I hope you're enjoying the series. See you next time.